Okay, hi everyone. I'm Joe. I'm Joe Wright from Christ the King, and
I'm Helen Oyston.
so I'm the Oracy lead, and Helen's the Oracy champion. And first of all, thanks very much for Grangetown. It was really interesting hearing what you've been doing, and lots of similarities with us, really, and the kind of strategies we've used. And our focus has been on improving discussion. So we've been trying to think about how we can make classroom discussion and particularly kind of exploratory talk stronger. So we've really adopted some Voice 21 strategies. Just quickly, our context: we're one form entry school, we're a Catholic school. We've got a nursery, so we're 3 to 11. 220 children, very low free school meals. So we do have quite sort of high achieving children traditionally, who have sort of done quite well kind of academically. So we wanted to sort of look at how we could extend that and develop pupil independence, because that's been a real focus for us. So if you could click on. So I've sort of touched on this a little bit. I think Helen's going to say a bit about where we started.
Yeah, so as Joe said, we have got articulate and high achieving children, but we really wanted to look at the consistency and the structured way that we're teaching Oracy. As Grangetown said before, it's thinking that it's not that part of it's not literacy, it's its own entity. And so we wanted to really make sure that we could sort of raise its profile throughout the school, and make sure that teachers knew what we wanted the children to achieve through that Oracy, that it wasn't just a case of, right, off you go, have a chat now, that actually we use this in a structured way, we use it for certain ways, certain sentence stems would work for certain times, and that we wanted more, like Joe said, that exploratory talk rather than just presentational talk. So our ongoing focus is to improve the quality of our classroom discussion using a whole school approach. That consistency is really important to us.
Okay, you could move on for us. So we looked at all of the kind of range of different strategies that we'd been shown over the various kind of training sessions, and talk tactics was the one that kind of jumped out at us. And what we like about talk tactics is it's quite flexible in terms of you can use it really right down at the very youngest children and up to year 6 and beyond. So we've sort of introduced it in a phased way. It really is a kind of a way of structuring discussions. But what's been really powerful with talk tactics, sort of started off with using the instigators and the builders and the challengers, and really sort of thought about when we first used it, it was kind of being quite explicit with the structure of the sentence stems and the talk tactics, but as it's become much more embedded, so I teach year 4, Helen teaches year 6, and as it's become more embedded, it's been much more natural, and I think that's what's really positive about these strategies, that they actually start off being something that you have to sort of teach and use and make really clear, but then it actually becomes very natural, so it's actually used almost without thinking about it a lot of the time. So that's really good. So if you could just click on. So this is just an example which I found that talk tactics really lend themselves to reading comprehension, and they're actually brilliant across the curriculum, but it's just an example there from doing the book The Iron Man. Actually the biggest slide there had some pictures of children doing some talking, but we cut out the faces, but this is just a sort of an example of using a kind of a rich question, and we really have tried to explore. It's also something that we've looked at throughout the curriculum, really, in terms of challenging our more able pupils, but how to use good questioning and how to get children to really unpick their learning through questions. And one thing I think is on the next slide, if you could go on, I will actually go back. We talked about, we've really tried to develop the big questions, which are a Welsh, I think the Welsh Government, it's on Hub. It's a resource that we found really, really powerful on Hub. We had Estin a little while ago, and we were using big questions in a couple of lessons during Estin, and they were really positive about it. So it's a bank of resources. As a good example there, what's better for learning, teachers or the internet? And that's being discussed in year 5. And it's just a bank of questions which really kind of promote rich discussion, and kind of used in sort of parallel with the talk tactics, we find they really kind of develop the children's thinking. So big questions and talk tactics together have been really powerful for us. So this is something that we were given by Voice 21 when we had our development day last year, by Jess from Voice 21, and she gave us this overview, which we really like and found it useful, is to kind of use the talk taxis in a structured way. So starting off in the early years and then building up to year 6, I mean, you can see it's self-explanatory there, but it's a useful slide. It's a useful tool because it kind of makes clear what you're expecting from each year group. So you've got the range of sentence stems on the right, and then the different kind of types of strategies on the left, and it sort of builds up. And obviously we're early days at the moment, but when this is really embedded, we hope that by year 6 they've got the tools that have been sort of built on in the earlier years. So I've talked about this a little bit. So the big questions. There's just that graphic at the top there comes from the, if you search, if anyone hasn't seen it, I'd really recommend it. Just search it up on Hub, big questions, and we're trying to match them as much as we can through our curriculum, and we're using, as I've already said, that talk taxi has been used to structure them. I think Helen's going to say a bit about discussion guidelines, which we really like.
Yeah, I think Joe made the point about the fact that it's got to be like an enriched discussion as well. We want to make sure our discussions are really focused, and so that's really important from the younger to the older children. But to do that, obviously, they need to know how to do a good discussion. And we felt that when we were shown the discussion guidelines and the listening ladders by Voice 21, this was absolutely the way we wanted to go and where we wanted to start. So we decided to use our discussion guidelines to improve the quality of exploratory talk. Obviously, dependent on the year group of the child. Children talked about what is discussion, and they decided themselves what they felt created a good discussion. We used 1 or 2 really good videos from Voice 21 as well to help sort of lead the children. So they watched some very good discussion between other children, and then we're able to identify, well, I think this worked well in that discussion. Maybe that could be one of our guidelines. So each of our classes put together their own discussion guidelines. So we've got these around the school now, and there is, you know, they're appropriate for each year group, but also as you look at them, the vocabulary changes obviously as they get older, but there is a consistency with those as well. So we've really sort of made that idea of discussion really important for the children. We've raised that profile first, and then I think is the next lovely. So again, listening ladders, same sort of thing as discussion guidelines. We decided that they are also really important, and I think our children always have a lot to say, but maybe most children are like this really, but they just don't listen. There's no listening and taking on how that discussion works, and can I, rather than just saying what I want to say, can I build on what's already been said? So that, again, the listening ladder we felt was a really important place to start. And again, classes have worked on that themselves. Our early years I think they find these sorts of things a bit harder, because they feel maybe, how are we meant to go about this? So the Voice 21 guidelines that we had, that Joe just previously shown, they were really helpful because it meant that we could say, well, look, here's a structure, so don't push yourselves, but just start here. And the listening ladder, again, we've said, look, you don't need to have 7 steps, you can have 2 steps. You know, so it's really making sure that the classes understand the importance of it, and we're building on it, as Joe has said, we're building on them every year.
Yeah, so there's, oh, sorry.
Yeah. So that, yeah, those discussion guidelines are just an example of one that we did in class.
So on our next steps here, we put down, we want to monitor it more. That's the last thing on that list there, the learning walks, but listening walks, we're planning to do that in the summer, so we can do that in April when we've got our development day. And we want to really just make sure that all the classes are kind of up to speed and the same kind of strategies, because these are our focus areas. But really, that I think the important thing with Voice 21 is there are so many different tools and strategies that you can try out, and actually listening to Grangetown talking about things like talk tokens has kind of rang a bell with me, and thinking, oh yeah, actually that I remember seeing that on the training and thinking that would work really well, because you've got that kind of you know, getting children to take turns a bit more. So there are so many strategies that we really like it, and we're looking to sort of just embed it really now, and also link it to the curriculum, because we have done a lot of work on our curriculum, as all schools do, and thinking about how we can really use this to kind of as a vehicle for developing all the AOLEs really. It's not just about English, and I think that's really important.